Given the sine, meaning positive or negative, of two trig values of an unknown angle, state the quadrant in which the angle lies. That's what this video is about. Well, look at number 7 as an example. The key is understanding that when you deal with the unit circle, the sine acts as the y value and the cosine acts as the x value. So, with that in mind, when they tell us that the sine of the angle is less than 0, alright, they're telling us that we have a negative y value. When the cosine is less than 0, that means we have a negative x value. So they're just asking what's the quadrant where we have a negative y and a negative x. Well, the y values are negative below the x-axis. Alright, so when we're talking about negative y values, we're talking about this area down here. X values are negative to the left of the y-axis. So at that point, we're talking about this area over here. Okay, so obviously the area where both of those things are true is this green zone. We're talking about the third quadrant. Okay. Now, again, sine is the y value on the unit circle. So when the sine function is greater than 0, that means we're talking about a positive y value. Okay. Now, looking back at our little diagram of a unit circle, okay, if we're talking about positive y values are here above the x-axis, as we have discussed. So that means we're talking about either the first or second quadrant. But then, okay, the tangent has to be negative. Well, remember that the tangent, well, maybe I'll just put it here. Tangent is sine over cosine. So that's like having y over x. So the question is, where is the tangent going to be negative, less than 0? Well, the only way the tangent is going to be negative is if the x value and y value have different signs. Because if they're both positive, tangent will be positive. If they're both negative, tangent will also be positive, right? Because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So we either need a place where the y value is positive and the x value is negative, or vice versa. Okay, we need an area where the y value is negative and the x value is positive. The signs have to be different. Okay, so tangent is going to be positive in the first quadrant, where everything is positive, and it's going to be positive in the third quadrant, because we have a negative x and a negative y. So, tangent will be negative in these quadrants. Tangent will be negative here and here. Okay. Tangent will be negative in these two quadrants because in the second quadrant, the cosine is negative and the sine is positive. And so that gives us a tangent that is negative. Over here, the cosine is positive and the sine is negative. Since they're different, that gives us a negative tangent. Okay, so since the tangent is negative here and here, the green space here is the quadrant that satisfies both conditions. So we're talking about the second quadrant. Let's do one more of these. Let's start with cosine because that's the simplest. Well, when they say cosine is greater than 0, they're talking about, you know that cosine is the x value. Greater than 0 means positive, so we need positive x values. x values are positive to the right of the y-axis. So that's going to be over here. Okay, so here's where the cosine is positive. Now, but we also need a positive cotangent. Now remember that cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. Okay, so cotangent and tangent will either be positive together or negative together. So we can really just switch our brains and focus on tangent again. So we already discussed this on problem number 8. That tangent is going to be positive in the first and third quadrant, because that's where sine and cosine are the same sign. And tangent will be negative here and here in the second and fourth quadrant, because this is where the cosine is negative and the sine is positive, or here's where the cosine is positive and the sine is negative. So if the signs are different, tangent's negative. So anyway, we want the places where the tangent, and therefore the cotangent, are positive, greater than 0. So that means we are talking about either the third quadrant, because that's positive, or the first quadrant. Okay, so obviously it's the green zone here that satisfies both conditions. So first quadrant.